Good afternoon. My name is John Miller. I am the Managing Director of the Operations Community at the Manufacturers Alliance. Thank you for joining us today for today's webinar, where we will learn about the benefits of implementing private 5G wireless networks. Before we get started today, I have a few housekeeping items to go over with you. All attendees are currently on mute. We invite you to type your questions as they arise during the presentation. Please type them in using the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will be reserving the last 10 to 15 minutes of the presentation for Q&A. We will be launching a couple of polls during the presentation today. So look for those and please answer those so you can get a benchmark against your peers. A survey will pop up in your browser when we exit today's webinar. We take your feedback seriously and incorporate it into our future planning. Finally, today's webinar is being recorded. We will send you a link to the recording and slides after the program. I'd like to give a big thanks to today's webinar sponsor, Communication Technology Services. CTS provides custom carrier-grade in-building and campus connectivity solutions for enterprise and mobile network operators, solving and managing the most complex network challenges. Today, you will hear from Rob Serbone, Vice President of Product Management and Marketing for CTS, responsible for their private wireless network offering. Rob is a seasoned product management executive with over 25 years of experience launching new products and services in the telecom and wireless industries with Intelsat, Time Warner Cable, and Sprint Nextel. You will also hear from Per Treverne, Director of Ventures and Partnership Industrial for Ericsson, a leading provider of 5G network equipment in the US. Per has over 30 years of experience in the telecom industry and has expertise in charging, O&M, managed services, IoT, and private network solutions. So thanks everyone for joining us today. And I'm going to turn it over to Rob to get us started.
All right, thanks for the introduction, John. Hopefully everybody can hear us great. For everyone in attendance, thanks for joining us today. We're here to introduce you to private wireless networks, a new technology that you can put into your networking toolkit for business critical applications. First off, we're going to start with a poll to assess your level of awareness about private wireless networks. So please select from the options. You're previously not aware of private wireless networks. You're just becoming familiar with private wireless networks. You're seriously considering private wireless networks, or you're already invested in private wireless networks.
So Rob, I'm not sure if you're seeing the results here, but it looks like we have about 5% of folks are not aware of private wireless networks. 50% are just becoming familiar with them. 23% are seriously considering them, and then 23% are already invested.
All right, that's great. Yeah, thanks, Leslie. I didn't see that popping up, so that was very helpful. So, okay, well, thanks everybody for the feedback, and now we'll get on to the discussion. Per and I are going to present an overview of private wireless networks and why you should consider using them in your manufacturing operations. I'm sure, as all of you are painfully aware, the past 18 months have brought significant challenges to your businesses. Manufacturing operations and supply chain were severely tested. The supply chain issues resulted in underutilized manufacturing assets. There were quality control issues resulting from onboarding new suppliers that have led to cost overruns. We've had a lack of real-time communications with supply chain partners that's led to delays in decision that impacted production, mostly from not knowing what was coming through the supply chain when. And then employee shortages required companies to do more with less human interaction. As a result, we're seeing that many companies are looking at different ways to reinvent the way that they do business. The change is forcing increased investment in automation and digital transformation. Transparency is required within the manufacturing process itself in order to optimize both performance, throughput, and quality control. Companies are looking for faster supply chains that are more resilient with increased visibility and transparency. Automation is accelerating to replace live employees. And to be more agile, companies are turning to on-demand manufacturing to respond to supply chain shortages and dynamically changing demand. Transformation and automation projects have increasingly stringent application requirements. So we've got mission critical communications that are being introduced with video or audio, voice only, or robotics or AGVs that require high reliability, priority access, and very low latency. IoT sensors are being used in a variety of different places within production networks, and they're largely unmanaged devices that pose a potential security threat to the IT network that needs to be considered. Production monitoring requires thousands of sensors and video cameras requiring real-time processing of data to deliver results. And real-time monitoring and tracking of employees, equipment, and assets requires broadband speeds and wireless mobility. Unfortunately, the existing networks that IT managers are leveraging today struggle to meet with these new operational demands. While Ethernet's been the predominant network technology to date, it lacks the required mobility needed for these new use cases. And while Wi-Fi can satisfy some of these use cases, it lacks the security, reliability, and prioritization needed for business or mission critical operations. Now, networks from Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile can provide predictable performance, which is really what's desired, but they don't offer the enterprise the ability to customize the policies for their own applications and performance. This is really where wireless private networks come in. They can help deliver security and improve performance so that you can invest in more transformative projects. They deliver deep, wide coverage to connect everyone and everything, indoors and out. You get true mobility with efficient handoffs, both between the radios on your network, as well as to the extent you need to provide inter-network handoffs with the outdoor cellular network, that can be done. You've got unsurpassed security with robust encryption and SIM-based authentication, and they deliver predictable performance during peak loads that satisfies what you need for a mission or business critical application. The enterprise has complete control of these networks to set custom policies by device, by application, by protocol, so that you can ensure that you've got peak performance for all of your applications and users. So what is a private wireless network? It's really a local network within the enterprise that leverages the same technology that the public carriers use, so Verizon and AT&T. It leverages 4G or 5G cellular technology, and it provides wireless broadband connectivity for a variety of mission critical applications, such as push-to-talk, IoT, video, and edge computing. It is very similar to the networks used by AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile. It's just a scaled down version of that using small cell or DAS radio infrastructure. And most of the networks that we've been looking at are using a new service called the Citizens Broadband Radio Service, which is a new frequency band that the FCC freed up a few years ago, which provides licensed cellular bands, but at very low to no cost. So for enterprises, this is the first time that they've been able to go out and get cellular frequencies without competing for billions of dollars of spectrum with the big mobile network operators. And because the spectrum is licensed, unlike Wi-Fi, interference from third-party networks is minimized. So you get a more robust operating environment. And when you pair that with the cellular platforms, LTE or 5G, the enterprise is assured of a resilient, robust wireless network that can power all your business critical application needs. So as I previously mentioned, what we see as the biggest benefit of a private wireless network is that it's customized to meet your specific requirements. Not AT&T's, not Verizon's, not T-Mobile. So we can build out the network for the coverage where you need it, indoors, outdoors, customized to your requirements. We can design it so that you get the throughput to meet your unique application and user requirements, whether those are low bandwidth like IoT sensors or high bandwidth like video. And the key thing is that you control that network. The networks today are primarily using LTE technology, but they're 5G ready. And we use capabilities of 5G like a MEC to reduce latency. And we can do pretty advanced policy management, which in the 5G world is typically called network slicing, to optimize your application performance. And those are, as I said, all things that we can do today. The other key thing is you control your data. The data does not go back out to the carrier network and then come back down to your facility. We can keep your data on site for low latency and high performance applications and connecting back into your application servers, whether they're on site or in a data center that you own. Keeping the data on site, I'm sure as you're aware, enhances security, maintains privacy, and reduces the risk of data theft. Finally, and this is probably the most important piece, you as the enterprise get to define the rules that dictate your application performance. You can tune the network for things like low latency for automation projects, high priority for mission critical push to talk or employee safety applications, guaranteed bit rate for high definition video for surveillance or process monitoring, and prioritization of different applications over best effort or non-real-time applications to ensure that you're always getting the performance that you need. And then finally, you can do a lot of things in terms of device onboarding, setting different lists up for blacklists and whitelists of applications, of IP addresses, of users, while also managing the way that those users access the wireless network. Do you want them to have access to the entire network within your facility, or do some users only need to access a certain zone within that network? All that can be done. In terms of the benefits, I wanted to walk you through a case study with a recent customer that we have that's an industrial company that has IoT sensors that monitor mining and oil field operations for seismic activity. They actually collect a fair amount of data today, and they're typically in remote areas monitoring remote mining operations. So they pull in 1 gigabit of data per day per sensor. And this company, till now, had really been using expensive public cellular networks for connectivity. So they were using AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile. And so a gig a day, 30 gigs a month for a device is a pretty expensive value proposition. We were able to go in and install a CBRS private wireless network into that location. We actually used microwave backhaul to the internet because there was no connectivity on the site. And then we're using solar panels for the power. So it is a bit of a science project. But we're able to get that data off of those sensors and deliver it back to their data center so that they can process that data in real time and look for trends in this seismic activity that could lead to bad things happening. And the benefit is we saw a 38% reduction in OpEx for this company over a 5-year term. So there's definitely significant cost savings that they were able to see. In terms of other applications, I wanted to give you some insight into real-world manufacturing cases that we're seeing. They have a number of common characteristics, including predictable, resilient network performance over a wireless network. And again, the big thing is these are real applications that we're seeing. There's a lot of talk about all kinds of different applications that could be done, and those are all possible. But we're typically seeing companies lead with a single application to prove in the value the business proposition, and then move on to adding additional applications to that network. So in the first case, we've got an automobile manufacturer that has a large rural campus that they're using for production. And today they shuttle parts between buildings using 30 to 40 foot trailers that's towed by a tractor operated by an employee. They're launching a pilot now to test using an autonomous guided vehicle to move the parts trailers between different facilities on campus in order to improve operations and reduce human interaction. In the second case, we have a lithium battery manufacturer has a plant surrounded by a large yard where they store chemicals that are used in the manufacturing process. They need real-time workforce communications that's been difficult to deliver reliably over Wi-Fi to date. They're using RealWear helmet-mounted heads-up displays, which feature not only video, but audio capabilities, and they pair that with Microsoft Teams to communicate with each other. Supervisors are communicating with workers, and then they're typically accessing also documents from Office 365 to kind of help them either track different supplies, to scan different barrels so that they know what's in the barrels, and then really to just look at process requirements that they've got to make sure that things are going well in the manufacturing process. So they're using video, audio, and applications that altogether performing significantly better over the private wireless network than they would be over Wi-Fi. In the third case, we had an oil and gas refinery that's been using push to talk for mission critical communications for years, and they currently have a proprietary system that's end of life. They're hesitant to reinvest in another proprietary system. Really, we're looking for something where they could put in a network and have a more open solution and use that network for a variety of different applications in the future. So we were able to propose to them a solution that included industrial grade Android handsets running a mission critical push to talk service that we can prioritize using QoS on the private wireless network to ensure that it really is mission critical and that the communications are always getting through. The network is delivering optimum performance, but it also provides an enhanced experience, because now, in addition to just the push to talk on those same devices, the employees get push to video. They've got man down alerts, so they can tell if there's an employee safety issue. And then they can use that same mobile handset to do mobile broadband for other devices that they may be using on their person. And the facility is also looking at additional applications in the future beyond handsets, things like drones that they could use for pipeline video inspection, both inside the pipeline and outside. And then finally, we have a customer that's looking to install a fairly sophisticated video surveillance around the perimeter of their plant to monitor unauthorized entry so that they can prevent spying on their manufacturing process, which they feel is fairly proprietary. The challenge they have here is it's a very large campus, and it's in a remote area. So Wi-Fi is not really an option because it would be prohibitively expensive, and they don't have wired connectivity out to the edges of the campus. So by putting in a private outdoor LTE network, we can capture high quality HD video that they can use to do the surveillance, and it's really a perfect backhaul application. So while these networks are really a great tool for manufacturing IT managers, they do require careful planning to ensure that you get the best performance out of the network. So it's best to choose a partner that has deep experience in designing, building, running, and supporting these types of networks. And this isn't an exhaustive list, but some of the things that you may want to think about as you're starting to go through your journey into whether you need a private wireless network are, what is the coverage that you're going to require? And then do all your users require coverage to be the entire footprint, or do you need to separate the coverage into different zones that will be optimized for different applications or user loads? And do you have indoor requirements or outdoor requirements or both? And then what's the capacity of the network that you're going to need? And there's really multiple variables here. I'd say the two largest ones are going to be the number of users that you have on the network, and then trying to understand whether those users are evenly distributed across that network or are they concentrated in different zones. And the second piece is, what are the applications or the use cases that you're looking at? Is it something that's very throughput intensive, like high definition video, or is it low bit rate, couple of kilobits per second for an IoT sensor? The next one is really, what is your device strategy? The great thing is that there's more and more devices coming out every day, and we are starting to see more embedded devices that'll be available for a variety of things that you could be using in your facility. But a lot of the applications that we're also seeing today are still requiring a little bit of a custom solution using either an Ethernet gateway or router or a kind of a MiFi Wi-Fi type device. So you really have to kind of consider that. What are the devices you're trying to connect, and what is the solution on the LTE 5G side? And then how does that network integrate back with your LAN? In most cases, we're seeing people want to keep this traffic on site. So you really need to think through your IP strategy and how you're going to carve up your network in terms of VLANs and getting the data from the different devices or different users back to different applications or different application servers or data centers where you need that data to go. You definitely need to think through your security requirements, which is not much different than you have on the IT side, but it is very important on the wireless side. As I mentioned, you have some devices that will have fairly robust security kind of embedded in them, but many of the IoT sensors that are out there today are unmanaged devices and would require a separate overlay security fabric in order to really secure those devices. And then once you get kind of through understanding what your requirements are, you really need to look for a partner that understands the RF planning process. Because it is fairly sophisticated, and you have to use higher end planning software and have engineers that really know how to use that software. And then the installation is also cross-functional in terms of it requires not only IP and LAN experience, but you've got to have that kind of radio frequency experience on the cellular side. And then think through spectrum selection and management. So do you want to use the CBRS spectrum that I talked about, which is fairly low cost? Do you want to try and go out and get a higher priority license called a PAL license, which can be had on the secondary market, which gives you, potentially a little bit more secure wireless connection or resiliency, and those can be had for a higher cost. And you need to kind of think through that depending upon some of your use cases. And then finally, network management and operations. These are wireless networks, but they are a little bit more complicated to operate than a Wi-Fi network. So you really need to have somebody that's got expertise in cellular networking to make sure that not only from an operations standpoint, but an ongoing care and feeding, that you're able to introduce new applications and still continue to optimize that network so that you get peak performance. So hopefully this gives you a good primer on private wireless networks and some things to think about. Now I'm going to turn this over to Per Treven from Ericsson to give you some additional context.
You're on mute, Per. Per, you're muted.
Okay, now.
There you
go. Am I sharing my screen? Am I sharing?
The correct one. There you go. That's the right one. You need to put it in presentation mode.
Yep. Perfect.
That's good.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you for having me. I'm Per Treven with Ericsson. I'm going to share some use cases from our factory, among other things. But first, we have another poll that we want to conduct, and that is related to the industry that you represent.
Per, I'm not sure if you're seeing the results there.
No, I can't.
So it looks like the majority of folks are actually coming from electronics and computers. Second to that is automotive. And then we have a few folks from metals and metal fabrication, chemical, and construction equipment.
All right, great. Let me move ahead. I created a word cloud. And I think Rob, he touched on a number of these different words, but these were just words that I had that came to mind in looking at private networks and smart manufacturing. Quite a lot of terminology and many different aspects of this whole smart manufacturing that comes to mind. So it's a little bit of a challenge to overcome, to understand these and how to go about them. So it's just very easy to come up with a lot of buzzwords that are being used to describe or to try to see what comes to mind when talking about smart manufacturing. We did a poll from some individuals that we interviewed to look at where they were in their adoption and maturity. And what we saw from our poll was that from an advanced perspective, we would see that the energy and the public sector, they were the top. But manufacturing then comes soon after, somewhere between beginning and advanced. And then we can see that it slides down to, in our poll, the lowest adoption level so far was healthcare. There are a few categories, I would say, that maybe were not represented in this list that I've been working with. For instance, mining and ports and so forth. But it gives a little bit an idea of sort of where is it possible to look at what others have done. To the right, I had a couple of comments that when we're talking about the 5G use cases, there's like this super category of smart factory. And a lot of it is used to improve factory operations. But as you will see, what we have done in our smart factory outside of Dallas, some of them are not necessarily just related to the factory operations, but also to building management and so forth. If we look at the most important items that you would like to achieve is reducing the latency and improving the bandwidth and security. So those were listed as some of the highest characteristics that you wanted to achieve with a private 5G network. This is our smart factory. We started building that a few years ago. And from the outset, it was decided that this was going to be leveraging 5G and wireless technology as much as we could to basically understand the technology, understand better how to implement it and how it could be beneficial to us. So today we do have tours as well at our factory that we have now virtual tours because of the COVID, but we also have in-person tours outside of that. And in those tours, we will show a bit more in detail what we are doing and how it's looking. But what we can see is that it really provided us a lot of improvements. Some improvements are measured per employee. Some of it is measured in terms of reduction in manual material handling. But one use case that maybe is not specific to a factory is energy consumption, energy and water. So that is not specific to a factory. It could be other buildings as well. And so we do have a lot of focus on sustainability in Ericsson. So these are very important outcomes for us. Initially, when we started thinking about the use cases, we came up with I think over 75 use cases, but as those were prioritized and distilled, we have nailed those down to about 25. Here are 11, and out of those, I'm going to highlight 3. But if we go through them just very quickly here on the overview slide, energy monitoring and management, I mentioned. That is to make sure to be able to reduce your energy consumption. Augmented reality for remote support. Most people are familiar with what that means. Some have tried it, some may not have tried it. I'll go through that a little bit more in detail as well. Digital adherence for safety and quality. Those are related to sort of individuals and making sure that there are an adherence to the safety zones, for instance, and so forth. Environmental monitoring, end-to-end digital thread for radio production, which is specific to our factory. Alerting and escalation using wearable devices, connected workers, digital material tracking and visualization, performance management, machine learning, based on visual inspection, automated unpacking process, and now the last one here is control tower to showcase plant dashboards. I think what is really common sort of across these use cases is that collect the data. The approach that we took to this was to try to collect as much data as possible. Put that into a database so that you can access and do some action on this data. So you can do AI or you can do other analytics to understand how the so to better sort of see how you can modify your processes to achieve the outcomes that you want. So the energy and monitoring and management I mentioned a bit, and this is something that this use case has been there for a long time, and it does really help to reduce the energy bill. And it's really about how to sort of turn on and turn off systems, and making sure that you get the most out of your overall system here, and you have the visibility. And talking about the AI to be able to make changes that will get you to that improvement. That improvement doesn't come automatically just from installing a private 5G network, because there are some other components as well to make it happen. You need to have the visibility, and as I said, you need to be able to do the analytics on the data. Material tracking is important in a factory. Understand where items are is going to reduce your manufacturing cost, improve your operations, and you also, by knowing where items are and when they will be sort of on the way to a station, etc., helps you a lot to optimize your manufacturing. It's about getting the visibility to where items are, and to optimize again based on the data that you are collecting. So this is also a use case that is very important to the factory that we have. This is not from our factory. This is a different use case, and it's just showcasing here. This is in Europe, in Germany, and this just shows that there are combinations in terms of how you're using your private network and the operator's network, and they can coexist. So you can have a shared RAN, sharing the same radio network, both for the for your private network and the operator's network. So individuals can have better coverage on the operator's network at the same time as you're keeping your data private on your private network. So in this particular case, the operator has their core network and the enterprise has their core network. So all the data that is important to the industrial aspect is separated from the operator's network. But it's, in a sense, a reduction of the investment to be able to share that network. So you get sort of a double bang for the buck here in having the same radio network for two networks. Here are some of the change drivers and considerations that I see. Of course, first you need to think about what is it that you want to improve. And when you have figured that out, then you need to look at the different options. And sometimes the private wireless network or private 5G network may be the answer to some of those improvements that you would like to do. I see that a good start is, of course, to talk about the use cases and the return on investment on those use cases. But as we have talked about use cases quite a bit, I still see the network and the platform as a foundation for innovation. I think it's hard to realize all the use cases up front. So I see as part of it is also where implementing the network can lead to additional innovation of other networks. And the networks, they evolve as well, provide new functionality, better performance, which also then can lead to further innovation. When the use cases are considered, it's good to think about the requirements. What are those throughput, latency, security requirements for those use cases? The type of networking solution to support them. We talked about CBRS, that may be the solution, but there may be other aspects of networking solutions. In some cases, it makes more sense to use Wi-Fi. In some cases, it makes more sense to use private wireless. Some of those need to be considered. Spectrum, we talked about CBRS, but there are also operators providing their spectrum to private wireless. New applications. What are the applications that will fulfill these use cases? Do you need to invest in new applications, or is it an integration and perhaps a retrofitting of already existing applications and devices? Traffic planning to make sure that the security is there and the quality of service. Are different use cases needing different quality of service? They are more critical than others. Those are some upfront considerations that need to be taken. Radio planning for coverage. Coverage is important to achieve the throughput and latency that you're requesting. And then the implementation and integration. How do you want to implement this? And that is often where solutions integrator come in to be able to solve that without too much detailed involvement, perhaps from the enterprise. A lot of times, enterprises, they are using some solution integrator already. Perhaps they can be trained to do this integration as well, or maybe they are cooperating with somebody else. And then operations and maintenance. How do you want to operate it? Do you want to do that yourself? Do you want to have somebody else do it for you? That is also one of the important aspects. It does, as things change, it does require some changes from the O&M side as well. And of course, you need to, similar to a Wi-Fi network or your IT network, it needs to be maintained. Finally, here are my steps that I'm thinking are fairly straightforward. To make sense of things, it's good to get a trusted partner to gain additional information. And I think demonstrations are very good to get additional insights. What have others done, and what insights can you get from that? Get some understanding around the capabilities and strengths so that you can make a sort of good decision, understanding of where would you like to go with your networking and which requirements it can fulfill, and then identify the use cases and select some partners to plan and drive implementation. I see those as high-level steps to get started and get to a point where you have something implemented. What we are doing also is that we are working with partners to get some starter kits to make it easy to get the everything integrated from the beginning. That's it from me. Thank you very much.
I think you can stop sharing your screen,
Yep,
there, then we'll go to Q&A. So a couple of things came. Yeah, a couple things came in already, but I think a couple things here to start with is most people are brand new to 5G or private wireless networks, right? So I think there's a couple of questions that come to mind right off the bat. You know, one is security for sure. So tell us a little bit more about the cybersecurity that's built in or that is applied to this network as opposed to their standard networks that they have now.
Do you want me to start with that?
Sure, Per.
Yeah. So I think that there is some built-in security already from a 3GPP perspective, but you need to take a sort of holistic approach to security. You need to look at the network, you need to look at the devices, you need to look at your applications. And when you're looking at that overall security, you need to make sure that you are monitoring and making sure that you're up to date on the overall threat. we have security solutions that are sort of actively looking for cyber threats related to these types of networks. In the end, it's about the approach that a company takes to it. There's built-in security, as I said, but I think it goes into the overall IT security and the overall approach that you take to that security. There is those solutions that is helping you specifically with threats for wireless networks, private wireless.
Yeah, of course. Rob, anything to add to that?
I mean, yeah, I agree with that entirely. You need to take a holistic approach. I mean, in many cases, we can extend some of the security policies, if not the platforms, over to the wireless network, so they've got a consistent experience from the enterprise side. But it really depends on the applications and the types of devices that you have out there. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of IoT sensors, while they're great in terms of delivering value for the enterprise, they're largely unmanaged. And in that case, sometimes you have to have an overlay platform that, like Per mentioned, really looks at every device on the network and what's happening and where the traffic is going in real time, and possibly adopt a zero trust security model to make sure that you're securing kind of all those devices. But from the wireless network itself, you've got fairly high level encryption and SIM level authentication. And to a large extent, that's kind of works out of the box. So it's not like Wi-Fi where you've got to go kind of tune it and implement things. Anything can be hacked, but it certainly is a more robust out-of-box experience.
Right. So the other thing, as you're getting started with this, is this a complete replacement of your existing Wi-Fi network, or is this something that you use in combination with Wi-Fi or your other networks that you already have?
I mean, in my head, I think it's probably a combination of both. I mean, I think ideally, you talk to some folks and they would say, yeah, well, I'd like to get down to a single converged network. I think Wi-Fi is good for some applications, right? It's got a fair amount of ubiquity and it's built into devices and it can be low cost. The challenge is that it's still, at the end of the day, even with Wi-Fi 6, it's still a best effort network, and they make improvements with every new release, but it's moving things closer to, frankly, a cellular network. So I think you're still going to have Wi-Fi for high throughput applications where you don't need to have predictable performance, or you can tolerate unpredictable performance. But if you really have mission critical applications that your business depends on for dollars and cents, it's really better to kind of put those onto a private wireless network and then kind of leave the more best effort applications on the Wi-Fi network.
I can comment there as well. I've seen both too. There are some that want to replace their Wi-Fi network completely. And I think also, as we are looking at a factory, there are some machines that you may never move, and you will wire those because you don't need the wireless aspect or the mobility aspect of those machines. So it's a little bit of mix. I think the probably more common is that you have two networks and you separate the traffic.
That makes sense. So somebody asked about, what's the average customer investment, and we really don't want to get into, what it would cost, because it's probably different for every application. But I think one of the concerns that we're hearing is that, these private wireless networks are very expensive. So what do you see as, how can, medium and small size manufacturers get into this, private wireless network environment?
Yeah, if I can start answering that question, I think the cost is coming down. Eventually, it comes down to your return on investment. What types of improvements are you looking at? What business problem are you solving? Now, you don't want to invest in a private wireless just because of it, but there needs to be a real reason or a real problem that you need to solve. Then you have in the market, there are different solutions in terms of CapEx, OpEx, which way you want to go. So I think that it becomes more affordable, and you have more different type of approaches in terms of financing.
is it one price for all, or is it scalable? Is it a scalable application? So you can start small and build as your needs grow?
Yeah, it's typically that. I mean, it's best to understand, from a few years out, looking out 3 to 5 years, what you think your use cases are, so that you can build that application roadmap out. And really, when you build the radio design, know that you're building a design that you're not going to have to go back and revisit and throw some more radios in later. But it does scale a bit with how many devices that you've got on the network, because you've got SIM cards and kind of other per device variables or per user variables. So I mean, at the lowest cost, you would be building a coverage network for whatever your facility is, right? You don't have a lot of high throughput stuff. You've got a few devices that are getting on the network. And we saw that one of the use cases I talked about, where they were doing some of the real-time communications in the yard outside the facility. They only had about 100 devices on there. So the network was really just a coverage network. We didn't have to get into building something super dense. So it typically depends on the customer's requirements. In terms of the business model, as Per said, I mean, we can support a variety of business models today. And we're definitely super supportive of the as a service model. We would love to manage the network. We think that we've got the skill sets and the engineering backgrounds to kind of do that and optimize that performance for the customer. And we can do everything from making the entire thing as a service to accommodating a variety of different upfront cost models and everything in between.
So the other thing here,
and maybe one more comment, John.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the aspects, depending on the coverage, Rob talked a bit about the coverage. I think what you have with a private wireless network is that usually you have a better coverage than what you have with a Wi-Fi network. In our facility, we just have a couple of radios to cover our 100,000 square feet production area. So you can use higher wattage. You have a better reach, better penetration from the private wireless network than you have from a Wi-Fi network.
Mm-hmm.
And even though there is a lot of metal inside, actually it's fairly good coverage, even though there is a lot of metal in the factory.
That's good to hear. So is this something that you can hook up to your existing machinery, or is there additional setup that's required, or devices that have to be modified or added to do a private wireless network?
I can give some example from our factory again, going
Okay.
back. So if we're looking at in there, we have these autonomous or the AMRs, the mobile robots. Mm-hmm. Now, those today they don't come sort of 5G enabled out of the factory where they are manufactured. So we have gone through a retrofitting of those. So we have retrofitted them from Wi-Fi to 5G, and that retrofitting, after a little bit of testing, it was going really well. So there are some considerations that you need to do, but as more devices are becoming available, it's getting easier. But right now, I would say that there's quite a lot of retrofitting that you need to do. You may also need some gateways. If you have RFID devices or Bluetooth devices, you may want to have those on the 5G network. You need to have a gateway to be able to achieve that connectivity. So there is a little bit of work to enable the devices on the new network, so to say.
Okay. Thank you. So, Per, we got a question that came in on the Q&A that says, how does Ericsson provide interoperability between 5G, CBRS, and Wi-Fi for subscribers, or do you treat those networks separate for the enterprise?
So for 5G and CBRS, we have both in our factory. So we have both CBRS and millimeter wave. So that is possible to combine. When it comes to Wi-Fi, usually we don't sort of include that in sort of the same realm, but of course you can do hotspot. So there is a possibility to combine that as well. But from CBRS and 5G, there is no problem.
Mm-hmm. This is another question that says you had one of your first slides what does WIP stand for in the adoption side for commercial real estate? You had a line that said commercial real estate and it said WIP on that line.
Oh, that was just that was a work in progress. So we didn't have that data yet. So
Okay.
so that was what it meant.
All right, thank you.
Sorry for the confusion.
That's all right. That's all right. So Rob, you mentioned as a service, and I know a lot of the manufacturers that we deal with are moving everything to the cloud and getting out of on-site storage and networks and services. So what do you tell somebody that has gone all to the cloud and now they're going to have on-site network and services?
So it goes back to their requirements. If they don't want to have on-site network and services, we can get by with hosting the network out of the cloud. So we actually operate a network today where we're running out of a couple of data centers today that are tier 1 colo facilities. So we can run a fully cloud hosted service for a customer or a fully on-premise service. But what we typically see is the customers still have some data, and they may have an edge node from an AWS or someone else that they're going through, and we'd want to do the integration into that to make sure that we're optimizing the latency. So wherever they're hosting those applications and services, whether it's on-prem, whether it's in the cloud, whether it's in their data centers, we'd want to probably put that our edge compute node as close as we could to that node to make sure that we're optimizing the network there.
Yeah, exactly. Do we have any other questions from the participants today? So like I said, I think a lot of our member companies are interested in private wireless networks because of the needs they're having in the automation and IoT and Industry 4.0 world that's fast approaching and that they're building out. And I think there's a lot of questions left to be answered. So we really appreciate you guys being here today and giving us a look at how this is going to work in the manufacturing environment in the future, in near future, I'd assume. So just in closing today, I want to thank Rob and Per and CTS for sponsoring. To everyone on the line, thank you for joining us today. As a reminder, a short survey will pop up on your browser screen when you exit the webinar. We appreciate your feedback and use that for development of our future programming. Again, thank you very much today for your participation. And Rob and Per, thank you again.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a great day.
All right, you too.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody take care.
Bye.
Bye now.